It always starts the same way, doesn't it? She looks at you, but it's not really you she's seeing. She's looking at the man she imagines you could become. You can feel it in her eyes, that flicker of, is it hope? Or is it a kind of hunger? For a moment, you think you're finally being seen, but you're not. You're being measured, assessed, scanned like a blank canvas, just waiting for her to come along and paint her masterpiece. But the masterpiece was never you. It couldn't be. And Carl Jung, he tried to warn you, not with the soft, encouraging words of a life coach, but with the sharp, surgical precision of a man who spent his entire life staring into the psychological abyss of the human soul. Jung's life's work was to map the vast silent continent he called the unconscious, the part of our minds that operates in the shadows, pulling the strings of our desires and decisions. And in that darkness, he discovered something terrifying about the nature of attraction. He found that women don't just fall in love with men, they fall in love with an idea of a man, with a fantasy, with a projection. And the most chilling part? Most of them have no idea they're even doing it. You think she's choosing you, but what she's really choosing is a version of you that she has created in the theater of her own mind. You've been cast as a psychological puppet designed to play a specific role in her private movie. And the moment you go off script, she doesn't change the story, she just recasts your part. Jung gave this phenomenon a name, the Animus. It's the inner masculine image, the archetype of man that lives inside every woman's psyche. And when that animus is immature, undeveloped, or left unchecked, it becomes a tyrant. It's the unseen force that makes a woman chase a man who is wrong for her while rejecting a man who is right. It's the voice that makes her argue without reason, dominate without wisdom, and moralize without accountability. Jung didn't mince words. He described this state as a kind of spiritual possession, a state where the woman is no longer acting from her own conscious self, but is in the grip of this shadowy, masculine fantasy. And men, you fall for it every single time because no one ever taught you how to see it. You confuse being desired with being known. You mistake being chosen with being understood. You believe her when she whispers that you're different, when in reality, you're just the latest actor she's hired to play a role she's been rehearsing in her own mind since she was a little girl. Then, inevitably, the fantasy collapses. The mask slips. You say or do something the character wouldn't, and you're left standing in the rubble, confused, betrayed, and humiliated, wondering what on earth you did wrong. But you didn't do anything wrong. You just stopped being a convincing actor in someone else's play. Jung warned that the only way out of this psychological theater is a process he called individuation. It is the difficult, lifelong journey of becoming whole within yourself. And here is the uncomfortable truth. Most men never even begin this journey. You've been trained from birth to chase approval, to seek validation, to let a woman's gaze define your worth. And as long as you remain in that state, you will be doomed to play the same role in the same tragic play over and over again, getting replaced every time the audience gets bored. Individuation is not glamorous. It is brutal. It requires you to turn away from the world and confront the parts of yourself you have buried in the dark. The weak parts, the insecure parts, the broken parts. It demands that you stop blaming women for not seeing you and finally start seeing yourself. Because here is the secret Jung knew that most men will never understand. You don't become a man by being chosen by a woman. You become a man by choosing yourself. You don't find your worth in her affection. You forge it in the lonely fires of self-knowledge, standing fully awake, fully responsible for your own soul. A man who has faced his own unconscious cannot be seduced by another's projection. He is no longer a puppet in a fantasy. He is the author of his own reality.
Jung observed that the greatest tragedy of the modern man is not that he is rejected, but that he is so willing to mold himself into whatever shape he thinks will finally get him accepted. You call it compromise. You call it partnership. You call it love. Jung had a different name for it: self-betrayal. He warned that men who ignore their own inner development become slaves to the feminine projection. You bend yourselves like wet clay into the shapes demanded by women who, very often, don't even know what they truly desire. You stop being men and you start being masks, smiling, nodding, agreeing, performing, until you can no longer remember who you were before you put the mask on. And women, they sense this. On a deep primal level, they can feel it more than you could ever imagine. The very thing you think will make her love you, your obedience, your predictability, your constant availability, becomes the very thing that kills her attraction. Why? Because the feminine instinct, as Jung taught, isn't drawn to comfort. It is drawn to mystery, to risk, to the man she cannot fully define, contain, or control. The moment you make yourself a completely known quantity, without boundaries, without a spine, you don't become more lovable. You become invisible, disposable, replaceable. And yet this is the paradox that keeps most men in chains. You fear being alone more than you fear being fake. You would rather lose yourself than risk losing her. You would rather live your life playing a role than face the terror of standing on your own stage without applause. But Jung taught that until a man is willing to embrace that solitude, he will never ever be free. He wrote that individuation is a path not for the faint-hearted because it requires you to die before you die. It requires you to let the false, performing versions of yourself burn away so that something real can finally emerge from the ashes. But let me tell you something that no one wants to say out loud. This path, the path of individuation, is lonely. It is terrifyingly lonely, because as you walk it, you begin to see things you can never unsee. You start to recognize the games, the masks, the subtle lies people tell themselves just to feel safe for one more day. And when you try to speak about what you see, they'll mock you. They'll call you cold, arrogant, too serious. They will accuse you of being the problem. But you are not the problem. You are the mirror. And people hate the mirror when it shows them a reflection they don't want to face. Jung knew this experience well. He spent decades of his life with patients who were utterly terrified to confront what he called their shadow, the dark, rejected, and undeveloped parts of their own psyche that they refused to acknowledge. And Jung warned that women in particular are often raised in a culture that rewards them for avoiding this very confrontation. They're encouraged to see themselves as pure, intuitive, and emotionally complete just as they are. But Jung didn't buy it. He wrote that one of the greatest dangers to a woman's psychological health was her unconscious animus, that inner masculine voice that speaks with a false certainty, a false authority, and a false moral superiority. He warned that if a woman does not face this inner force and integrate it, she becomes its prisoner. She is doomed to project it onto every man she meets, blaming them for the very war she refuses to fight within herself. And there you are, thinking you'll be her savior, thinking you'll be the exception, thinking that if you just love her hard enough, prove yourself loud enough, perform well enough, she'll finally see you for you. But that is not how projection works. Jung taught the projection is a thief. It steals reality and replaces it with illusion. And until both men and women wake up from that shared illusion, they are destined to repeat the same quiet tragedy over and over again, each one blaming the other, never realizing they are both just dancing with shadows. And here lies the most ironic, painful twist of all. The woman who once looked at you as her hero will one day see you as her enemy, not because you changed, but because you failed to be the fantasy she projected onto you. And she won't even realize she's doing it. Jung called this kind of psychological betrayal inevitable when neither person takes responsibility for their own inner world.
You didn't lie to her. You didn't betray her. You simply disappointed an invisible character she invented in her unconscious mind. You were never him to begin with, and that's why she resents you. Not for your flaws, but for your failure to live up to a myth she never even told you were hired to play. Jung once said, "People will do anything, no matter how absurd, to avoid facing their own souls." And nowhere is this more true than in romance. Men and women walk into relationships not as whole individuals, but as walking projections, dragging their unlived fears, their unmet needs, and their unresolved childhood wounds into the arms of another person they barely know. You call it falling in love. Jung called it a state of possession. And like a man in a trance, you keep walking right back into the same trap, thinking that this time it will be different. But it never is, because you have not yet dared to ask yourself the most terrifying question a man can ask. What if I am the one responsible for this pattern? You want to blame women. You want to call them manipulative, deceptive, shallow. But Jung would look you right in the eye and ask, and why did you allow yourself to be chosen by that woman in the first place? You see, the man who refuses to confront his own anima, his own inner feminine world, is destined to be a slave to the projections of the women he meets. You are not a victim here. You are a volunteer. You chose to play the fool. You chose to be the lead actor in her private myth. Why? Because facing your own emptiness, your own lack of wholeness, was far more terrifying than playing a part in someone else's fantasy. And this is the point where most of you will stop listening, because this is where the comforting blame ends and the brutal responsibility begins. Jung didn't offer cheap solutions. He didn't give you 3 easy steps to becoming an alpha male. He gave you the brutal, lifelong task of self-confrontation, of sitting alone in the silence of your own mind until the illusions begin to crack, until the voice in your head that whispers, "You are nothing without her," begins to die. And make no mistake, that voice will fight for its life. It will tell you that you need her, that you are incomplete without her, that no man can truly live without feminine validation. But Jung's work whispers something far more dangerous. It whispers that the man who can stand without her, without the approval, without the applause, without being needed, that is the man who is finally, truly free. Free from projection, free from performance, free from the tyranny of living as someone else's idea of a man. And when you reach that place, you don't become cold or distant. You become real. You become rooted, grounded, and fully alive in your own skin. And that is when, paradoxically, you become the most magnetic. Women will feel drawn to you not because you need them, but precisely because you don't. And you'll smile to yourself, not because you're heartless, but because you finally understand the game. You understand that she is on her own journey too, that she must face her own animus, that she must wake up from her own illusions. And you know, with a certainty that settles deep in your bones, that you cannot do that work for her. You can't save her from herself. You can only do what Jung did. You can walk your own path so fearlessly that you become a living mirror, reflecting the truth back to everyone who dares to look. Most will turn away, but a few, a rare few, will thank you for it. And that, my friend, is the difference between being loved for the role you play and being respected for the man you've become. And when that moment comes, When you finally realize you don't need to perform anymore, you'll start to notice something strange. You'll notice how uncomfortable people become around you. They'll sense a shift, a weight to your presence they can't quite name. It will unsettle them because you no longer fit into the predictable categories they use to feel safe. Jung warned that the individuated man is not welcomed by society with open arms. He is feared. He is misunderstood. He's labeled as distant or arrogant. But the truth is far more threatening to the status quo. You have simply become untouchable, unbuyable, and unmanipulatable because you see right through the game. And here's where it gets almost comical. The very people who once begged for your attention and validation will begin to resent you for no longer needing theirs. Women, especially those still possessed by the fantasy of the perfect man, will accuse you of being emotionally unavailable. They'll say you're too in your head, too analytical, too distant. But what they really mean, whether they know it or not, is that they can no longer control you. You've stepped off their stage. You've stopped reading from their script. And without that script, they don't know what to do with you because you've stopped being a character and started being a man.
Jung once observed that in the modern world, the gods have become diseases. What ancient cultures understood as divine possession, we now call neurosis. And make no mistake, the man who relentlessly chases validation is one of the most spiritually sick of all. You think you're being romantic when you say things like, "I would do anything for her," or "she is my everything." But Jung would shake his head sadly and tell you that what you call love is actually a profound refusal to carry the weight of your own soul. It's easier to project it onto a woman and make her the bearer of your hope, your meaning, and your purpose. Because if she carries it, you don't have to. But here is the brutal, inevitable twist. When she realizes she was never designed to carry the soul of a man, she will drop it. She must drop it. Because no woman, no matter how loving, can bear the weight of a man who refuses to hold himself up. And when she drops it, you'll feel betrayed. But you shouldn't. You should thank her. Because in that shattering moment when the illusion collapses, you finally stand face to face with the truth. The work of becoming a man was never hers to do. It was always yours. And in that raw, terrifying moment of clarity, you have two choices. You can blame her. You can become bitter. You can join the angry, resentful chorus of men who point their fingers at women, mocking them and swearing them off, like cowards who never dared to look into their own emptiness. Or you can do what Jung would have demanded of you. You can turn inward. You can begin the lonely, terrifying, and ultimately liberating work of individuating, of becoming whole without needing someone else to piece you together. Because the truth is, the woman you're so desperately searching for out there is a reflection of the part of yourself you've abandoned in here. Until you face that inner part, every relationship you have will be a performance. Every connection will be a transaction. Every love will be a beautifully decorated lie. But when you do face it, when you integrate your own anima, your own inner feminine, you become a man who no longer needs to chase women at all. You don't run after them. You don't manipulate them. You don't perform for them. You simply stand still, fully rooted in the truth of who you are. And from that quiet power, something miraculous happens. You no longer attract women who want a character. You attract women who want the truth. You'll know it when it happens because she won't demand that you perform. She won't try to change your script. She won't fall in love with a fantasy of you. She will stand before you, raw and real, not as a goddess looking for a worshiper, but as a human being who is willing to walk her own path beside yours. No masks, no projections, no games. And when you meet her, the real her, you'll see the difference instantly. She won't flood you with grand declarations or treat you like the missing piece of her puzzle. She won't seduce you with the language of completion, because she isn't looking to be completed. She isn't looking to be saved. She has done her own work. She has met her own shadow. She has confronted her own animus. She has burned through her own illusions. And that is why she won't need you to perform. She won't need you to carry her soul. She will stand there holding her own, looking you in the eye, not as a man she wants to mold, but as a man she is finally ready to meet. In that meeting, there is no desperation, there is no clinging, there is only truth. And that truth, Jung taught, is the rarest and most dangerous kind of love, the kind that demands nothing, yet offers everything. Because it is not born from need, it is born from freedom. The freedom to choose, the freedom to walk away, and the freedom to stand together without illusion, without fear. But let me warn you, most of you will never experience this. Most men will quit the path long before they get there. You'll settle for the performance. You'll settle for the fantasy. You'll choose the temporary thrill of being seen as someone you are not, because facing who you truly are still feels unbearable. But if you have the courage, the brutal, gut-wrenching courage to keep walking, to keep standing alone, to keep stripping away every false layer you've built to earn approval, you will eventually find yourself. And when you do, women will no longer be the source of your identity. They will no longer be the mirror you use to feel like a man. They will become something else entirely. Partners, not prizes. Mirrors, not mothers. Allies, not saviors. And you will love them, not because you need them, but because you choose to. From a place of strength, from a place of wholeness, from a place that knows, without apology, who you are. Carl Jung didn't leave you a map to follow. He left you a warning that every man who refuses to confront himself will become a slave to the projections of others. But he also left you a challenge, to walk the path of individuation, to stop blaming women for the roles you volunteer to play, to stop seeking wholeness in someone else's eyes, to stop waiting to be chosen. Because the man who chooses himself, fully, unapologetically, relentlessly, is the man who cannot be controlled by fantasy. He cannot be seduced by performance. He cannot be reduced to a character in someone else's script. He becomes the author of his own life. If you have made it this far, if you felt this message strike a chord deep inside you, don't just scroll away. Don't let this be another piece of content you consume and forget. Take a moment, like this video, share it with another man who is still living in the illusion, and subscribe for more. Your support helps us spread this message to wake up the world one man at a time.